Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Nancy Kovanic, and my topic today is based on the millennials and communication. I'm trying to discuss, and this is going to be one of those presentations where I encourage you to ask questions or make comments as we go through the presentation, because I heard that if there's something that this group doesn't like, they would yell it out anyhow. So feel free to do that. I'm very comfortable with a dialogue with the audience, so that's fine with me. But the purpose of the presentation today is about improving communication. The focus was from the perspective of a baby boomer, but I'm looking at the audience today and I'm seeing there are probably more millennials in the audience than there are on the other side of the boomers. So I'm going to do what I do best, which is use the slides, but try to have more of a dialogue based on what you want to know and how you want this presentation to help you in terms of the goals that you came here today for. So let's go ahead and get started. On this first slide, the reason I have this, I'm going to read this. Every generation brings its own set of expectations to the workplace, and especially in a competitive economy, and we all, I think, can acknowledge that, companies need to adapt or they're going to lose their top talent. And the reason I have this slide is because one of the bigger issues in the workplace today and why people leave is because they're not getting what they personally need. And one of the reasons is because for the first time in U.S. history, we have multiple generations in the workforce at one time. So we have a large group that are called the baby boomers, which most of you know. Those are those people that at the oldest age have just turned retirement age, but there's such a large range of years that the boomers still can be in the workforce, and they're around 50-ish in age. They're most likely to be a millennial's boss, and therein lies the biggest problem, that the viewpoint, especially from the older boomers, and the expectations from the millennials usually don't match. And so that's why we're having this discussion. So for a millennial, they're criticized for their generational values and value systems and what they expect and don't expect in the workplace. And that's really a harsh criticism that if a boomer knew more about the individual, or at least about that generation, they would change the way they manage. So I'm going to ask you here, because I know there's some people that can look at these words and they'll say, this is like a first grade series of words that I can easily define. Staycation, pimp, tweet, frenemy. Somebody in the audience, please tell me one of these words. What's the easiest one for you to, what's a staycation? Anybody know that one? What's that? What? Work from home. A staycation, though, in this term would be that you don't have any money, so instead of going to Hawaii, you stay at home for your week off. So that's a staycation. That's just, terminology. These are all, everybody in here, how many of you don't tweet? Anybody? Because what kind of conference are we at? If you didn't, you would probably be a normal person, yes. That's me paraphrasing from someone in the audience. But that would be a word that if you didn't know that and you're at this conference, you'd be at the wrong conference, basically. But if I were presenting at another conference where it's primarily boomers, which I have, most of them they would probably have heard the word tweet, but don't understand what it is and definitely don't do it. So someone that, who's here tweets a lot? Anybody? How often? Every day. If I were to take that out of your life, what would happen? It would be weird. You would have to adjust. You'd have to modify your behavior. You'd have a replacement behavior, probably something you would do. But I bet you'd be with technology. And I'm guessing that you're not going to be picking up a telephone and calling people to do that, right? How many boomers would pick up a telephone, before they pick up an electronic device to do something? And that is what we're talking about today, is the differences in generations and the use of technology, too, on communication skills. It's many times the best way to communicate is the way that the majority of the people at this conference do. But many times the people in charge your managers or the people that are the top of the organization that may be in positions where they have authority over someone in a technical field don't see the value, and it's my way or the highway, and have no ability to understand why they need to change, and why, if they don't, many times their companies will be the ones left behind. Okay, so one thing I want to say about the different generations, and since I'm also a college professor, this would be something I would probably expect somebody to do one of those yelling things at me. Well, you said it was a Y's from this age group to this age group, and a millennial's this one, and a boomer's this one, and an X is that one. What I found is that even last night when I was looking to practice this presentation, and I got on Forbes.com to read a business article about communication in the generations, what I found was the years that they identified for millennials were 2 years off from what the other numbers that I'm currently using. So what I'd like to say is that basically when we're talking about the millennials, those are those students, I say students because those are students in college right now, or that group that are getting ready to graduate, and have been up to those people that verge on being almost in their late 20s. I had a person tell me that they were, the terminology's on the cusp. So for instance, I'm on the cusp of, I'm not quite a boomer, and I don't relate completely to the boomers, but I'm not quite all the way into the other one, which is like a Generation X. But I'm definitely more of a boomer than I am on the other side. You know, I've got some tech skills, those type of things, but a person told me that they were their upper 30s and trying to claim they're millennial, and it's like, that's a whole different issue, because we've got people that are trying to act like they're one, you know, they're with a group of people that their age does not match, nor does their technology skills or their perceptions based on their generation. So with this one, what I'm trying to make the point is not the differentiation between if you are technically in this, it's how you behave and how you think and how you look at the world of work, because there's other factors other than your generation on what kind of employee you are. Okay, here's a slide here. If you look at these pictures and they make absolutely no sense to you, chances are that you are a millennial. If you look at the picture here of the female with the hair, that is something that if you, the late, you know, that we're like 60s. The middle picture here, I'm trying not to move too much, in the center of the screen, who knows who that is? Anybody? It's Gilligan. So, and someone said Dobie Gillis. Okay, if you said Gilligan, your generation is probably from Gilligan's Island, right? The TV show. And do you when do you remember seeing that show? Was it a rerun or, okay, a rerun. But if you knew Dobie Gillis in this picture, that was before Gilligan's Island. So you probably are more the boomer generation. So, and then the other picture that you see here that says Clueless, anybody see that picture and relate to that? There was a more of the preppy, and this was Clueless was a TV show. It was probably more of an X than a millennial, or a very young X type in the like late 80s, 90s era. Now, the Keep on Truckin', that would be, if anybody saw this one, you're verging on the boomer side too, because that was, what would a millennial say would be something that you would see on a t-shirt today that has some kind of catchphrase? Anybody? What would be a slang term that you'd see on a t-shirt today? Any? Because I can't think of one because I'm not a millennial. You bad bro? You mad? See, I can't even say it. So I'm going to take that as I have no clue what that is, but everybody else in the audience, millennial, will get that. That's what happens, is that I don't get it because I don't communicate, because I'm not from your same generation. and we have issues that way. So when we look at the boomers here and the X's, the Generation X, you can see, I've got 65 to 77, and the boomers 46 to 1964. If you're an X and you're born in 65, you're going to be on the cusp, and you might relate back and forth. Also, too, sometimes just because you're a person that may be socially integrated with a group of people from a different generation, you adapt those behaviors. And that's what happens in the workplace, too. We want you to assimilate into a corporate culture. So what you want to do is to follow their norms of the company. So you learn those behaviors that are appropriate and inappropriate. Or many times you don't get promoted, or sometimes you don't fit in, you would quit, or you would, maybe be terminated. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about the millennials here. I would ask you to look at this sentence at the bottom of the screen. I think this is probably higher. The average millennial sends up to 1,500 text messages a month. Do you think it's more or less than that? My assumption was that it was probably higher. How about who here texts? A month. Okay. And as a college professor, I ran this by a group of students, and they told me they're probably it says an upper level course, between 20 and 22 is the average age, that many of them text a lot more than that. In fact, if you look at the environment on college campuses, what are the new rules of behavior in the classroom? They've changed dramatically over the last 5 years. But because we have that millennial group we have to address immediately, corporations, since they're filtering in, they don't even see that it's an issue. So for instance, as a consultant, I would work with a company to write a policy for their HR department on access to the internet. So how many of you think, in technology, okay, we want to block a lot of things from our employees so they don't shop at, Target and spend their day doing things like that versus doing their work. Makes sense, right? Now, what do? What would a millennial do if they didn't have access on their desktop computer? What would they do if they wanted to shop at Target? Get on their phone, right? Well, many companies don't even recognize that the devices they have, they're going to goof off more that way between texting and everything else they're doing on their handheld phone than they ever did on a laptop, because it's so much easier to be discreet about it. How many of you have been at a meeting and had your phone and done all kinds of things other than pay attention to what you're supposed to be doing in that meeting? Nobody says a word. And if you're really good at it, they don't even notice that you're doing it. So I see in companies today that many times they'll say, before the meeting starts, everybody agrees to turn their phones off. And then that one person's going to say, but I can't do that. Blah, blah, blah. They're too important. Why would you be in a meeting if you're going to distract everybody else? The most diverse generation. And this is one thing, if you are a millennial, and I think you don't realize, because when it's your generation or who you are, most times what individuals do, human nature is to make the assumption that I'm just like everybody else. That the way that I behave and think is just how most people behave and think. It's not a view of a generation that way. And millennials don't understand the difference is that they are the next big thing for business, and are already the big thing for business. For one of the reasons is the diversity in the generation. We've now have a generation that was born with technology, globalization. If you, how many of you had access to the internet by the time that you could use any kind of electronic device? And my generation, and I'm not going to date myself because I know this is being video recorded, I'm pretending like I'm much younger than what I really am, or my older sister would say that she remembers black and white TV and no remote. And the big deal in the family was when we had a color television. And now what happens if you lose a remote? You would spend all of your time trying to find the remote versus getting up and actually manually changing a channel on a TV. And now I have a TV that you can't change a channel without the remote. So think about the difference in technology and how it impacts even the old people's lives. So they respond to some things in which they have to, but those things which they don't have to, change is difficult, and boomers are going to hold on to their old behaviors because it's easier for them. And it makes for a very dysfunctional company. And I can guarantee you 2 years ago when I made presentations on generations, and primarily with boomers, the attitude was they need to change and get with a program at my company. My way or no way. And now within 2 years it's switched focus to that we need to, in the last part of my presentation here is I'm going to give you the 4 tips for each side, what we need to do to make a stronger organization on how we can do those things. Because I have now offend probably boomers more than anyone else with my presentations, because they have got to understand that the technology and the generational differences, because of the diversity of the generation, and I'll give you some examples here based on this slide, it's not just ethnicity. It's not that. That is one factor that we have based on the complexity of the U.S. It's not the biggest thing. One of the biggest things is that this generation, and one of the most positive attributes of a millennial, is that they will become passionate about a cause or an issue, and that will become a focus in their life. And here's my example on that one, is that I worked with a group of managers, and it was based on generations, and they were boomers. And one of the issues that came up just in the Q&A was that this manager was also in charge of an organization which it's called, well, I better not say the name of it, sorry. The name of it was a local organization in which you became a member and you went to lunch meetings, and it was like a business club where they had presenters at lunch. And she was in charge of recruitment, and they were had set a goal for to increase 24% the group of professional employees within 1 to 5 years within their starting a position. So primarily the millennials, and could not figure out why they could not attract people to this organization. And the reason is because this is a business club which has no specific cause or purpose other than just networking. And the millennials, if they're going to spend their time doing something, they're more likely to do it based on a cause in which they believe in. Because a boomer would go to this and become part of this organization so they could list it as something on a resume that they were members of all these professional organizations, because it would help them with promotions. And a millennial, and this is a generalization about the millennials, which is not true or indicative of all individuals, but for the most part, that wouldn't make as much of an impact, because a millennial is going to, first of all, follow their own heart. And if they are passionate about a cause, they will participate. But they're not going to just join an organization because it's going to look good on a resume. Boomers, others that are in a group generations prior to that would, because that's how you got ahead in business. It was about putting those things. The primary focus of most millennials is not work is number one. It's a work-life balance is number one. Where a boomer in a professional position out of college would say that my number one goal is to get in a company and work as hard as I can and get promoted. And that's a major goal. Not to say that other things aren't important, but professionally that would be it. You would hear most millennials are going to say that when I'm ready to go great guns about my profession, I'll do that. I don't feel compelled even to do it as soon as I graduate. If I want to take a couple years off and find myself in terms of what I really want to do, that's what I'm going to do. And then when I'm ready, I'll get that job if I choose to do that. or if I want to try 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different kinds of jobs before I get in a profession. That's okay too, because it's individualized. And that's a value, because you don't want to hire somebody that all they want to do is get ahead. You want to hire someone that wants to be in that position because they want to be there. And that's such a good thing for millennials and for corporations, companies, small business in the U.S. In the differences here, what I'd like to just say on the generational differences between 20-year-olds in 1976 and 2006 goes to the point that I just mentioned, about vacations, about a job that they have a job and then they have friends. A boomer, chances are they would say that I have a job and a lot of the people I work with are my friends because they spend most of their time with them. A millennial is more likely to say that I have a job and then I have my friends outside of work. That's more likely to occur. And then the prestige about the positions, and this is one too, I think that we have to be very careful in making these generalizations about a whole, every millennial. I think it depends on individuals and also too, different types of professions, people that are attracted to a certain field. For instance, they are more of an entrepreneur than they are a person that wants to be in a stable organization in which they're going to have opportunities that way. So many different factors influence this, but the point of this last one is value as a job most people look up to and respect is very important. That the younger you are, the less likely this is to occur, which means that they're more interested in doing the things that are right for them versus things that are right for ego or prestige or power. So basically when we look at the millennials and the Ys, as I've noted earlier, their ethnicity different, technology is one of the things that you can just say, if you want to just define a millennial versus any other generation, just say the word technology. Grew up with computers and cell phones, globally connected. The one thing I'd like to note about that is the difference in especially a boomer, is that if you know the word encyclopedia, that was your internet growing up. If you wanted to know something, you had to look it up. That's the only way you're going to find out something. If you were fortunate enough to have encyclopedias in your home, that's how you found out information. The next thing would be go to the library or get the information from school. Where now, millennial, and if you think that your technology skills are great, think about the 5, 6, and 7-year-olds and what they're going to do to you when you're in the workforce. So you're going to you can get on the internet and find out anything. And that also not just impacts business, it impacts society. Because if you can find something out that your parents don't want you to know because they think it's morally wrong, all you got to do is get on the internet and you can find it out yourself, and you don't have to wait until you hear it from someone else or find the opportunity to find it out in other ways. You can do it yourself. The volunteer attitude is passionate about a cause, independent, and the one other criticism that millennials get, that sense of entitlement, and that comes with the difference in organizational structures. A boomer grew up with a hierarchy, which means that there are, in a corporation, for instance, you're going to have levels as you move up an organization. Each level is going to be based on power. So if you are in a lowest level employee, you go to your boss and you go to that boss goes to that boss, and on up. What a millennial would do is, if they had a great idea, they might send an email right to the CEO of the company and think nothing is wrong with that at all. And a boomer would be ready to fire him for that. Do you get the difference? Because a boomer is saying, you did not follow what you're supposed to do, which is follow the hierarchy of authority. And a person that's new to the company, worked there for 2 years, is not supposed to make recommendations to the CEO of the company, period. So what I want to do to summarize and to conclude is with my 4 tips. If you are looking at how to attract and retain millennials at your company, what you need to do first of all, and this is something that you would hear for any generation, but it's very important to millennials because they are very geared towards continual communication with others. They grew up that way. They were valued for what they knew, and they also have technical skills, which means that if you're a manager without technical skills, a millennial will have the ability to know something more than you do about a job, versus a boomer, when they went into a job position for the first time, there was no technology, so anybody that worked at that company didn't know more than their boss. And now they do. That's a huge problem because it's not fair to millennials to say, okay, now tell me what to do here, and then here, shut up and take orders because I'm your boss. It's very confusing. So with that, what we need to do is on the communication side is for millennials to provide a lot of feedback with frequent encouragement and lots of engagement, which means that communicating with them and understanding where they're coming from is really important, and valuing them for their tech skills, but also talking about what their assumption is. If they know tech, doesn't mean they know everything about the company or what needs to be done next. The next one's individualize. You need to make sure that, to the point of a millennial being a person that's going to follow their passion and their cause, you need to know where they stand on those things and make opportunities available along those lines for them or support them in those areas. The third one is probably the most important, and when I, as a consultant, function on this one, explain, explain, explain. There are so many communication challenges between a boomer and a millennial, it's not funny. So, for instance, if I would say something, and I have 3 millennials that work for my consulting company, I found that I've had miscommunications even knowing this, because what I will say in terms of something that we're working on as a project, they don't understand the work norms. Here's an example, making a phone call. I asked on a project, we needed to get a hold of a group of managers that were high level. They were like VPs and above. And I asked the person, I said, just call them and blah, 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 blah. You know what happened? He sent him a text. No, excuse me. He sent him an email. And I said, okay, why did you send him an email and not call him? And didn't want to tell me, you know. And then what I figured out was, first of all, this person, my millennial, it's so uncomfortable for them to make a phone call. They'd rather text or email. That's their primary means of communication. But in this situation, the people that I wanted him to get to talk to were upper level. So they were boomer age. They don't even read their email. Somebody else reads them for them. And for this group, it was important to do it that way. And so you have to do it situation, you have to explain why. And another situation, when I was looking at some records, I went to get a printed record, and one of my other millennials, what they did was they got the records via the computer and they texted everybody, the people that were in those records that we need to get a hold of, and got the answers back before I even got the files out of the cabinet. Because people that were the millennials were the target, they always have their phones there. She got the information back quicker than I could have done anything. And I thought I was going to be good about emailing. She sent a text. So see how the different, you have to explain it, you have to be open to it, and you have to find out what's the best communication for the situation. And you have to explain and explain over again if it's something that relates to your company in which the millennial doesn't know. And you have to be open to the fact that you need to change if you are the person that's making the decision for the most effective thing for your company. And the last one is give them a leadership role, because they're very capable. And it needs to be based on, if it can't be in your company, in terms of they very much want to make a contribution to a company. Many times they're not in a position where it's possible. But if, for instance, if someone had an interest in like their Habitat for Humanity, community service project, and to get them the skills of a manager to provide them with the opportunity to lead a team on a build, which, you know, the companies that I work with, a lot of them they'll have a company team and they'll do a Habitat for Humanity build. This person is your millennial, you know, put them on that project. They'll learn how to work with a team. They'll learn how to communicate properly with a diverse group of others, and they'll learn how to better project management without it being a challenge for them at the work, so they can get, you know, pick up a skill set. So in summary, what I'd like to say is that even if it's generational, the one thing that we need, the takeaway from here is the technology. That companies with millennials need to recognize what technology brings to them through people and to appreciate it versus oppose it. And then finally is that in terms of communication, regardless of generation, it was item number 1, it's about the feedback and the engagement. If you want to have a better company or better communication, you need to be able to talk to people and find out what they're about and who they are, because that's the future of work, is that you have to look at people as individuals, not just as an employee. And that's been so neglected that it's now creating a huge problem because of generational issues. So I'd like to thank you today for attending the presentation.